Hey guys, my name is Eliana Keller, and today I want to really dig deep and talk with you guys about this question of how can I live on one income as a married couple or as a family? How can I live off of one income and still gain that financial freedom, that financial stability that I am looking for, that we are looking for as a family? So stay tuned and let's get into this topic. I think for me, something that has been on my heart recently is just looking around and seeing couples, seeing married couples, just not necessarily struggling with their money, not necessarily having issues with it, just not having this knowledge about some of these things that are so important to just understand in order to really gain that financial stability, that financial freedom, that financial peace that you're looking for. I think that there's a lot of couples out there who they maybe would love to live off of one income, but they don't feel that they can do it at the time, or they're maybe living off of two incomes and they don't know how. How am I going to live off of one income? How are we going to be able to do that? And I think first we have to start with an understanding of our money, right? We have to understand just our basic needs and just have an understanding of that before we dig deeper into this question of how do I live off one income? So, when you look at your money, what do you look at? Do you look at it and just see one big pile of everything, or what do you see? And when you really break it down, um, a lot of people, a lot of financial professionals will say that there's five main ways that you can spend money, and any way that you can spend money is in one of these five categories. And so these five categories are giving, right? And that might be tithing to your church, that might be giving to friends, right? That looks very different for very different people, right? That's giving. There's taxes, right? And that is something that a lot of us we don't even think about. That's withheld from our paycheck. We pay it like at tax time we think back, "Oh yeah, like I paid my taxes, right? What? This is our tax bill, this is how much I gave." But it is one of the ways that like our money is used. You rightfully earned that gross income, right? Your big take home pay, like your big above that, your gross. All of that money is what you earn, like that is your money. And some of that is going to pay for your taxes. And so that is something that is a category, right? So there's giving, there's taxes, there's also saving. A lot of us think of saving, right? We're like, oh, I have this goal, I want to save for it. Or maybe you're just like, okay, I need to be saving my money, so, toss some aside. Here we go. We're great. We're good. Don't really know what we're saving for, but I've heard it's good to save money. So let's put that into saving. So that's saving, right? So we've got giving, taxes, saving, and then there's also debt. Now, debt is something that some people have, some people don't have. So, this might not be applicable to you. You might not have debt, and so this category isn't applicable. But really, statistics have shown that a huge, 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 huge majority of American people have debt. And so this is one way that our money is spent, and whether that's towards debt repayments or whether that is just towards, the minimum payments, like there's a lot of variability within that, what types of debts there are. There are a ton of different types. You can have auto, you can have credit, your home mortgage, that's a debt. We don't usually think about that one as a debt because we're like, oh, well, it's in an asset and, I'm building equity in my home while I'm paying down that debt. Oh, yes, that's true, but it's still a debt. So we've got those four. And then we've got living expenses, which is the one we most commonly think about. They're like, okay, these are my living expenses, right? And I think when we really take a look at these five ways of spending our money, we can see that living on one income is possible, even no matter how much you make, no matter how much, your husband makes, it is completely and 100% possible. Now, this once again comes back to the issue of values, right? So if I value, living off of one income more than I value buying the newest pair of shoes, more than I value, you know, going to the grocery store and just being able to pick out, more than I value, eating out, right? Now there's compromises there, right? But our values determine how we're going to spend our money. Our values determine our habits. And so when we're looking at our values and what we want to be, right? If one of our values is to live off one income, there might be sacrifices. There might be things that we're not able to buy, right? If we're living off of one income. And that sacrifice does come with that value. However, on the other hand, if you were say one of your values was, I really just enjoy eating out, I really want to make that a priority in my budget, I really want to make my like monthly shopping spree a priority in my budget, right? I really want to make sure that my children, I want them to be clothed and I want them to have all the newest fashions, right? If that's a priority in your budget and that's a value for you, that is totally okay. That's just a different value than someone who's over here, but you have to understand with whatever value you have, there's going to be sacrifices either way that are made. So on this side, with you're evaluating those monthly shopping sprees, you're evaluating that eating out, right? You might have to have that second income to be able to do all those things. Now that once again depends on how much, your husband makes, on how much that you're bringing in. 110%. But I think when we look at both sides, when we look at any decision we make with money, it's all about values. What do I value most? What do I value more? And so for some people, that means the mom values working because she wants to provide her kids with these new clothes. She wants to provide them with just this experience in a big house in the suburbs. Like that, and there is value in that, and that is what the decision that those parents have made. But at the same time, they have then sacrificed living off of that one income. However, if you're living off of this one income, once again, depending on how much your husband makes, you're then sacrificing other things. Like maybe you might not be able to eat out as much. You might not be able to make it a priority to have a monthly shopping spree or be able to take your children shopping, once a week or whatever the case might be. You might have to substitute like some of those things if this is your true value. So I think when we're looking at money, we really, really have to dig deep and we have to like understand what are our values? What are we working together for? So if you and your husband are talking, and if you're man and you're watching this, great. If you and your wife are talking, right, about money, like bring up those hard conversations, make time for them. If you cannot make time to talk with your wife or your husband about your finances, you have to set that time, like make that a priority because you guys want to be working together, right? In every aspect, in children, in finances, in home, like all of the different things. You want to be working together, right? Striving towards Christ together. And part of that is understanding your finances together. And that means communicating about it, just like in every piece of marriage, right? If you can share the same kids, you can share the same finances. So I think what you have to really do is you have to look at your options, talk with your husband, like start communicating about what your values are. What are his values, right? And honestly, I would even say, like, if you are unmarried, if you are single, if you are dating, if you're engaged, talk about this with your spouse. Talk about it with your spouse or who your spouse will be, or, you know, in the future. If you're engaged, that's more so the case. But even if you're dating, bring up these conversations with your boyfriend. What are your values? What are your goals? Because, right, that's what dating's supposed to be, an evaluation. If you're single, like start thinking about your own values and goals. If you have a value and goal of staying at home and you're like interested in a guy who has nothing that wants to do with it, he wants a wife who's super career driven, maybe that's not the best match. Maybe that shouldn't be a guy that you're interested in. So I think you definitely have to really evaluate your values. Start thinking about them now, whatever stage of life you're in. And if you're already married, fantastic. Start communicating with your spouse. Figure out what are our values? What are we aiming for? And ideally, when you're engaged, like start that conversation then. Start that conversation when you're dating so that you are both on the same page, growing together, growing towards Christ, reaching your goals together, because that's really something that you definitely want to do in a marriage. We've kind of laid the foundation of values, right? And we've kind of seen, okay, where our values are, that's going to be our end goal. So if you and your husband are communicating about this, right, and you both have a value of, we want to live off of one income, off of his income, right? You have to go back to those five key things: giving, taxes, saving, debt, and living. And once again, you can put them in a different order. That's just the way they came out of my brain. But, if you're thinking about that, think about, okay, how much are we currently spending on that, right? For giving, for those of you who tithe, that might be a percentage of your income. Like if you both are making, $90,000 together, that might be 9,000 that you're giving to the Lord, right? So, and if that's a percentage of your income of that whole thing, when you cut back or scale back on an income, that can all automatically change so easily, because then you just are giving less, and that's okay. Like you're just giving off of a percentage of your income. If your income's less, you're going to be giving less. So that's totally okay. That's usually something that's really flexible. You definitely want to make it a priority. And if you aren't already, like have that conversation. Figure out, okay, what are our priorities for giving? Like, do we want to give? Do we want to tithe? What does the Lord have to say about that? Dig deep into that. Definitely. So, if giving is going to be a percentage off of your income, right? When you scale back an income, that's super easy. You just scale back the same amount percentage wise, like you're just scaling back that giving as well. Um, and so that's usually something that's super easy for people, very seamless. Right? Taxes are the same way, right? They're gonna tax you on a percentage of your income. If your husband's making less, if you're making less, if you scale back on an income, like you stop, you come out of the workforce, whether that's to have kids or whatever, like taxes are going to scale back. Okay, they're just a percentage of your income. That's also not a huge deal. You just won't have that withheld. For a lot of people, they don't even actually think about that because they're not thinking about taxes in the first place. So it's usually not a huge deal. Now we're going to move on to saving. This is one that I think saving and debt both. Like this is super cool in that like saving when you're working towards your goals, it's discretionary in one sense because, you know, you like if that money was gone, right? You still could live because you're still sustaining your living expenses. You still could live if that saving was gone. But a whole nother thing to think about is you still want to be saving some. So this is actually a big conversation about your goals. You and your husband, you and your wife, you guys might come together and have some goals that you want to sustain. Some of that might be like a financial goal. A lot of goals in life have a financial piece or part to them that you need to think about. So, say I have the goal of buying a house, right? If me and my husband want to buy a house for such and such amount of money, right? We have that goal of saving up, and then we can figure out, okay, how much each month do we need to save to sustain this goal? So saving is super duper cool for that extra income. Like if you and your husband are both working, like, hey, put one spouse's like the wife's money, add that to your savings, like stock up, get money for your financial goals, meet them faster, 110%. That is a super, super great way that you can use that second income is just to leverage those saving goals. Just go ahead and like get those knocked out. And maybe that doesn't mean like buying a house right away, but maybe it means just saving up the money so that way when you are ready, when you feel like mentally and physically ready to sustain that, the finances are there. Like that is covered. So you could do that. You also could, put that saving towards retirement eventually, right? If you want to retire, if your husband wants to retire someday, if you want to retire someday, you can just stock up that towards your retirement. Makes it super easy with that second income. Like if you are living off of one income, makes it super easy to leverage savings, build wealth, help you maintain those financial goals that you're working towards. And the same thing has to do with that. So with that, the fourth item that I'm going to be talking about, it's very similar. If you have one income, my suggestion personally is make sure that the minimum payments are being made towards the debt with that one income, right? Minimum payments made with one debt with one income, right? And then with that second income, you can leverage that by just attacking the debt. Like just put as much of it as you can. And like for some people, they might have some saving goals, but they're like, okay, I have some debt. When I get this debt knocked out, I can save like that much more per month. Because when you pay down debt, you're giving yourself a 100% return, right? So if you're making an $800 payment per month, if you're making a $500 payment per month, if you're making $2,000 of payment per month, when that debt is gone, that's $2,000 back to you that you get to use. So it's a super cool way to kind of increase your cash flow, and then later too, like increase those savings goals is to get that debt paid off. And I think for a lot of people, it provides great just financial peace of mind for them of just understanding, okay, my debt is paid off, like that's covered. I don't have to like worry and fear that like creditors might come after me. I don't have to like worry about all this interest that is going to be accruing. Like how much more will you pay in interest? It is very eye-opening to actually look at the numbers and to see, oh my word, the longer you have debt, the more interest you pay. And it is just compounded. And it is crazy. So you save so, so much by front loading that debt, like just knocking it out. And when you're living off of one income, you can do that. Like you can use the second income to just attack that debt, get it out of the way, like give yourself that financial peace of mind, that financial stability to be like, we are out of debt. Like we don't have to worry, we don't have to be concerned. And not that you should necessarily be like super anxious when you have debt, but it is greatly freeing of mind when you don't have debt, and you can then work towards other financial goals that you might have for yourself. And so I think that that's one key thing is just to remember, like, if we're living off of one income, remember, like, you want to be making those minimum debt payments off of one income. You really do. And something that's key too is like for saving as well, like you want to make sure that you're still able to save off of one income, right? Because you want to be able to do all five things off of one income: giving, taxes, debt repayment, saving, and living, all off of one. Okay, so that's kind of the goal that you have. Now, your actual living expenses, right? Not including debt in the living expenses, just the living expenses. I would say aim to keep your living expenses under half of one income. And I know that can be hard for a lot of people to do, but it really, really frees up your money to be able to pay down debt a little faster, to be able to save a little bit more. And taxes, well, taxes can sometimes be a lot. I mean, it depends like on what your situation in life is and how much you're making. Definitely depends. But taxes are no joke. They really are. So I think just remembering like you have a lot of other responsibilities other than just your living expenses, when in actuality, most people just think of their living expenses when they're thinking of, okay, what do I need to do with my finances? Let's focus in on these living expenses. And, there is so much more. There is so much more. And I want you to be able to reach your financial goals. And so I think that that is like huge by living under half of one income to help you with saving off of one income. Because if you can live off of half of one income, you have the available funds to be able to save for future expenses for things that you really want. And it could really help you in the future to minimize debt. So you want to buy a house, like if you're able to save up a bigger portion than just the down payment and make that a bigger down payment, you are just helping yourself. Like you are just providing yourself with a little bit more freedom, a little bit more stability and peace in the future. So I think that that's something that's super important to think about. Really, really aim to have those living expenses under half of one. Okay, so now we're actually getting to the question of how do I live? How do I have my expenses on one income? How is that practically like able to happen, right? So like I was talking about before, figure out what half of one income is, right? And aim to put your living expenses at half of one income. And one way that you can do this, if you're not married, if you're single, if you're dating, if you're engaged, anything in that realm, keep your own expenses under half of one income, right? That's what you want for yourself because you're saving too. You're paying down debt. I would even suggest, like, if you are single, try to keep your living expenses even less than half of one income, like more at 30%. Because when you add another person in, it's going to get a little bit more expensive. It's just kind of how it goes. So try to be keeping it at about, 25 to 30% of your own income. So that way, when you get married, it'll be super easy to keep them at half. Now, obviously, that really depends on who you marry and your spouse, right? That's kind of a big player, right, in the whole thing. But I think that's what's super key about trying to live off of one income is communication between the spouses. And that starts when you're single. That starts when you're dating. Like if you are dating someone and you haven't at all like seen how they spend their money or seen their habits, like that's something you definitely need to be, you know, not necessarily obsessed about, but cognizant of, right? And no one is perfect. No one. People are going to make mistakes. People are going to be different. Some people are savers. Some people are natural spenders. Some people are natural givers, right? And generally, God's like, look, here's a saver and here's a spender. Let's just put them right together, right? So I'm not saying find someone who's going to have exactly every single same belief as you, right? But be looking for someone who is responsible with their money, knows how to manage it. And even if they are a spender, like some people can be spenders, but they still are trying to learn. They're still trying to spend their money wisely. And they're not like, let's just throw all of it out of the door. Generally, they still want to be financially stable. They still want financial goals in their life. They just don't necessarily have that thought process of, here's my long-term goals. Like, let's start reaching for them. So I think that that's a huge start to living off of one income is just having open communication with your spouse. And before that, like when you're dating, I mean, I'm not saying on the first date, ask them, how much do you make and how do you manage it? But if you're like getting to the point, like you're a couple months in and you're like, okay, I'm starting to really like this person, really get to know them, maybe even love them. I mean, you should start having conversations of how are you managing your money? Like, what were finances for you like growing up? And if you haven't had that conversation with your spouse, like have it now. Like, it is never too late. It is never too late to have that conversation of, you know, what were finances like for you growing up? Like, what do you remember about money? What are some conversations that you've had about it? What have you learned about it? And for many people, like, they haven't learned a whole ton growing up. Like, sometimes parents just aren't teaching their kids about finances. And I think that's something that I might address in another YouTube video. So hopefully we can dig a little bit deeper into that. But I think that's something that, you know, you definitely can grow together in when you learn each other's money stories. You might see, like, if you have one spouse that's extremely like, no, we're not spending anything, we have to save everything, like, they're very concerned about it, you have to definitely, like, ask them, like, what was money like growing up? Like, tell me a little bit about that. Tell me a little bit about your money story. Maybe not in such professional words because they're your best friend. Talk to them like they're your best friend, not like you're like a business associate. You know what I mean. But, you know, just like ask them about it. And a lot of times, like, there's a reason that they have the money habits that they have. Like, someone who might be super tight and be like, oh, I can't spend anything. Like, they might have grown up in a home where, like, there was not a lot of money in the house. Like, they might have grown up in a home where, we scrimp and save on everything, and, like, their parents might have been deep in debt and they might have seen how that had affected the relationship. I've talked with people who that was the case. Like, their parents ended up like getting a divorce and separating because of like these issues that revolved around money. Not like that, not that that's 100% of the issue, but like this child saw that and saw the tension that was there, and how like one parent's like spend whatever and one parent's like, no, I have to save stuff, like we don't have enough money to pay for this. And they could see the effects of it, and sometimes like that has a huge impact on that person's life until they really like are able to learn that, hey, like it's okay to spend. Like, if you're budgeting well, you're managing your money well, like it's okay to spend. But at the same time, like, yes, make sure you're saving, make sure you're meeting those financial goals. So open communication with your spouse is one super, super big one, right? So we've already talked about that. So now I want to get into more of like the nitty gritty, right? Because we did talk for a little bit about keeping your expenses under 50%. And if you're single, aim to keep them under 30%. Like, that would be ideal. Once again, it's ideal. So it doesn't always happen. But if you can honestly like look at your budget right now, and if you don't have one, I would love to have that conversation with you and help you create one. I would love to come alongside you. I do financial coaching, so I can meet with you one on one and kind of go through your financial situation and help you where you're at and kind of get that all figured out and help you do that so that way you can go ahead and meet those financial goals and have that financial stability. But if you do have a budget and or you're creating one for yourself, kind of look at your budget and see, okay, what are we currently spending, right? Because a lot of people are currently spending more than half of one income, of their husband's income. So definitely look at that and then figure out, okay, what can we cut back on? And I know cutting back is so hard, especially in this environment, this economy, because everything is so expensive. You're sitting there like, I'm trying to cut something back and it won't. It honestly won't. I go to the store and I'm like, I'm buying the cheapest foods in the world. I don't know why it's costing this much, right? So there's definitely things where it's very hard to cut back. The goal is 50% of your income. And like, right, if you cannot make that, if you feel that like, if you don't have any debt, that also will help. So like, if you don't have any debt, you might have the available funds to be able to do more than that. Like, you might be able to spend like 60% of your income, or 70 even, like, and still be saving, you know, probably not 70 because taxes and then giving pretty high, especially taxes. So, but it's 60, 65% and still be able to save a solid 10, 5, 10, 15%, even 20, depending on like your situation. Once again, like, you have to remember, this is not financial advice. This is like coaching, this is education. Like, I want to educate you, but there's also like every person, every marriage is individual. There's so many nuances. So this is just like a generic rule, right? Of under that 50%. Not even a rule, more like a guideline, right? But if you're trying to kind of keep those expenses under 50% and like you're close to that, you're probably going to be doing pretty well off. You're probably going to be able to maintain that living at your husband's income. Um, so I think that that's something that is super important. And so, like I said, cutting back on those expenses, if you're currently living above that, if you're eating out every other week, you might not want to eat out. If you're eating out every day, definitely don't do that because eating out costs way, way more. Like I can make a meal for like $5 to $10 for like a whole meal with leftovers. Though my husband does eat a lot. Sometimes like we're at thirds or fourths and I'm like, okay, don't eat anymore so I can have leftovers for leftover night because then it's free. I mean, theoretically not, but it's also like not a meal that I have to make, right? So definitely aim to keep those living expenses under 50%. And if you can keep them lower than that, right, you're doing awesome. That is fantastic. Like, keep them lower, but also kind of try to remember, like, if you're currently living at 100% of your husband's income, like, that's just the living expenses, not including all the other giving and everything else, it might be hard to kind of half that right away, right? You're not used to, just drastically, so maybe not cold turkey, just be like, boom, cut everything down, right? But try to start that process, right? It's a process, it's a growth process. And, starting to cut back. Okay, how can I, save an extra $100 this month, right? Or cut back. And that will really free you up to, save extra, pay down debt. Once again, I don't suggest saving unless you have a goal for it, right? So, like, your goal might be retirement. That's a totally fine goal. Like, put extra into your retirement account because you're going to need a lot in there just to retire. Trust me. I work with financial advisors. People need a lot to retire, especially the more you living expenses are, the higher your expenses during retirement are going to be, the more money you're going to need in that retirement account. So do remember that. But I know a lot of you probably aren't thinking that far into the future, but I think that is something to be cognizant of is just make sure you're at least consistently, like 10% would be great. If you can't do 10%, that's fine. Like right now, yes, your returns will be way better if you start immediately right now in your 20s. If you're 15, start. Like I cannot stress that enough. Investment is huge. You earn so much over the length of time. The longer the time you have in there, the more the growth is going to be 110%. That's just compounding. But if you have debt, compounding is working against you. So you also want to like pay that off. So I think that's why, you can work on both at once, but definitely want to prioritize getting debt paid down because that is just money going right out the window. Not that whatever you used it for in the first place was beneficial because it could be, like student loans. You got an education out of that. That's like literally providing your income right now. So it's not always the case, but in most cases, like you really want to put money towards that. Even like for student loans, I don't care if you're getting a great interest rate. I don't care if you're paying 0% because the government is making the payments right now. I still think that paying down debt is beneficial for you. It's beneficial for your family, and it comes with huge, huge financial stability and peace of mind. You're working on your living expenses, right? You're working on your debt repayment. You're working on your savings. Okay. So, right, make sure off of one income you can at least make the minimum payments on your debt. You want to be making more, especially if you have a second income, like push that towards debt, like get that out of the way so you don't have to worry about those payments when you like if someone lost their job, you want to make sure that you are able to live off of one income. And I really think that it's extremely beneficial for people to have that peace of mind to know, you know what? If I lost my job tomorrow, if my husband lost his job tomorrow, we could live off of one income and we would be fine, right? We would sustain our living. We would be okay. It would be tight, but we would be okay. And I think there's a huge peace of mind that comes with that. So definitely communicating with your spouse, definitely keeping your living expenses under half, and then definitely making sure that you can make those debt payments off of one income. And it is entirely possible. Now, here comes a part of saving. Saving is hard. Like, depending on how much you make, you could be like, if you're super frugal and your husband's making big bucks, you could probably be saving as much as you need for, your whole life. Like, you wouldn't even need to go back to work ever. You could stop right today and you'd be fine. Like, that is 100% the case for some people. Some people, depending on like where their income level's at, it might be harder. It might be harder because if you're like making those debt payments and you're in debt and you're making all the expenses each month, all the bills, utility, rent, all the bills, you might have like still some financial goals that you want to meet. Like, hey, like one day I want to have a baby. I want to have a house, right? And I'll get more into a little bit more of that in another video, and we'll see where that kind of goes. Especially want to get more into kind of the thought process behind finances and having children and how that kind of plays out. But for now, um, definitely like you might be worried about some of those future financial goals. And so I would say, like, if you are living off of half of your living expenses, and if the second income is honestly just knocking out the debt, and then you don't have those debt payments when you go to one, like that'd be awesome. But I highly, highly suggest like making debt payments, even the minimum ones off of the one income, even if that means saving less, just because that will help you in the future to alleviate stress, alleviate that pressure. And, there's always ways that you can find, like, if you truly are just struggling to make those payments, you truly are struggling and you're wanting to save more. I think there are ways that you can kind of work, or not necessarily work, but think of creative ways that you can make a little bit more money. We can talk about that later, or you can definitely book a coaching meeting with me, and I'm definitely open to talking with you through your finances. And if you and your husband are looking to scale back down to one income, definitely would love to help you do that. Once again, for you single, dating, engaged people, talk about it now. Aim to live off of one income now. Like, start now. Now is the time to start. Like, start those habits, build those values in right now so that way like, we are set. We are set. Like, I am set. If I was single and if I ever got married, I would be okay. So, I think definitely starting now, like this is so applicable for everyone. But, right, looking into the future and for you married people, definitely aiming to live off of that one income can bring so much financial peace, so much stability to the family, and provide so many other impacts and values that are like way beyond just the financial, right? Thinking more into the eternal than just financial. So definitely, if those are priorities of yours, I would love to talk to you. I would love to be a resource to you and help you move along. I'll link my website below so you can just go straight there. But I hope that this little video log, or, whatever they call it, was beneficial to you. Definitely like it, comment, share, save, whatever they do with YouTube, do it. Okay, so I just want to help as many people as possible understand that they can live off one income. And if this wasn't practical enough for you, like definitely have a conversation, because every single person, every single family is different. Your financial situation is different. So it's hard to say just generic stereotypes and just give a generic thing. But if you want to dig into that super practical application, follow along, book a meeting with me. I would love to talk with you about it. So I hope that this was helpful, and like, save, follow along for more.